Okay, so let's get started working on basic training principles, starting with number one in that list, which was specificity. This will end up being multiple parts on specificity, so I can keep the video length down a little bit. So I'm going to address some information here that if you know a little bit about the topic, you go, but wait, Lyle's leaving this out. No, I'm not. Part two, promise. Before I get to that, a quick note. So I was informed that little Milo Wolf made one of those ranking the such and such videos about fitness influencers. You know, the ones with the SABCDF rankings, which people actually have to have some sort of life experience to have an opinion on, by which I mean not a 24-year-old child like Milo. But I wondered for a while what level of university would give a 24-year-old a PhD anyhow, because little Milo got his from Solent University. Well, one without an international ranking at all, one that is ranked 55th out of 61st for sport and exercise science, and 124th out of 129th overall in the REF rankings. That level of university. Seriously, a decent American 5th grade science class would be more rigorous than that. In any case, little Milo put me in the D category, and I'm sure it has nothing to do with the fact that he's trying to join the circle jerk and publish papers with them, because notice he put all those guys in the S category. Nope, he's totally objective. But here's the funny thing. Milo was actually in my face group for over 4 years. And I always find it interesting when people spend so much time absorbing my information when they, post-butthurt, decide to have such a low opinion of me. During those 4 years, he never said a word to me, questioned what I wrote, or criticized anything. Not once in 4 years. Weird. I'm sure Milo can address exactly why that was. Why he stayed in a group of someone that he thinks is full of shit. Anyway, what happened? Well, that bullshit 52 set study came out, and as usual, I offered my $1,000 challenge to anyone who could complete the workout. Showing more balls than most, Milo stepped up. And well, he did the workout well enough that I paid him out, something I'm sure he never mentions publicly. And then in response to something I said that he took personally and got reamed out by my group and chicken shitted out like all the rest. And then I had to kick him out for blocking me, because you can't block group admins. And then oddly, he started talking shit about me. It's almost like he got his feelings hurt, and due to being diagnosably NPD like Lane Norton, decided he hated me. Remember, 4 years in my group. I'd mentioned that he put Alex Bromley, another person who hurt his feelings, in the D category. Weird. And he ranked Paul Carter, who he was buddies with until they had a falling out with, low too. Contrast, Brett Contreras was put in the S category, along with many of the others in that little circle jerk of people. I genuinely ask you, Milo, other than hip thrusts, what has Brett ever contributed to this industry? I mean, other than being a gross misogynist who's emotionally abusive and cheated on So-Hee Lee, and bullying the homeless. It's almost like he's ranking based on who or who isn't nice to him, or who he thinks can help his career or help him get his shitty lengthened partial papers studied. Tell me I'm wrong, Milo. Tell me I'm wrong. I can't wait for his and Mike Israel's egos to clash and for Milo to turn on Mike. NPD is a hell of a disease. But what you'd expect from someone so insecure as to demand he be called doctor? So what was Milo's issue? Why did he rank me as a D? Did he take one of my ideas and address it critically to explain why it's wrong? Did he use any science to actually invalidate any of my claims? No. That would have been intellectually honest. Well, apparently his reasoning was that I criticized researchers, or research, some gibberish like that. Now, I've been in the industry for a long time, and this has to rank as one of the top 10 stupidest things I've ever heard, especially coming from a so-called academic. But hey, go back and look at the rankings for his university. Because science is fundamentally based on criticism and debate and questioning data. If something is above criticism, that's religion, not science. Lest we forget, everyone in the circle Milo wants to be in criticizes other researchers all the time. By that I mean Brad, James, Eric, Lane, Menno, Mike, even if they consider their own sloppy work above such criticisms. Any good scientist should be able to address criticisms of the work directly and factually. Of course, this is something that exactly zero disposed evidence-based fitness industry experts has ever been able to do with my criticisms. I mean, not once. Brad makes pitiful excuses and then blocks people. Mike thinks fuck you, Lyle, is a rebuttal. Contreras just blocks people because apparently the only way he can be a man is when he's abusing women and the homeless. Just like the fucking little bully that he is. On and on it goes. If these people are so fucking smart, why can't they bring facts to address my criticisms? If I were wrong, wouldn't they jump at the chance to point it out? And yet they never do. Weird. What I suspect the bigger issue is that I criticized that 52 set study in a long-form video. The 52 set study that all the little Instagram social media dipshits, including little Milo Wolf, jumped on when it came out. By which I mean I looked objectively at the study, what it did, the results, and showed exactly what the paper said. By which I also mean I put screenshots from the paper of what was done, what the results were, and what the researchers themselves said about the paper. Which, as always, was not what people like little Milo said it said. And that made him look bad. Because it was abundantly clear that he was misrepresenting the paper. And that's why the best criticism of my work he could come up with was, Lyle criticizes research and researchers. Because I made him look like the ignorant child that he is. Except I did no such thing. He made himself look ignorant by producing ignorant content. I just made people aware of the truth. To that, let me add, the researchers themselves made social media posts pointing out how badly people like little Milo Wolf and all the others were misrepresenting and misinterpreting their data. What they said was exactly what I had said in my video about it. Hey Milo, are you going to put them in the D category? They criticized their own work because that's intellectually honest, and you were fucking wrong in what you were saying about their own paper. But here's the bottom line, little Milo. I've been providing good information to this shitty field for 30 years, longer than you've been alive, and 3 times as long as you've had pubes, assuming you have pubes now. Ideas that I introduced decades ago are standard practice now. I introduced flexible dieting in 2004 while you were still in diapers. Based on your infantile behavior, I think you might still be in diapers. It took people a decade to realize I was right, and now that's all anybody fucking talks about, with dozens of books with the same title. I introduced the concept to the industry. People use variations on my rabbit fat loss, also from 2004, as part of all dieting practices. My keto, protein, and women's book are the be-all, end-all resources on the topic. My stubborn fat protocols from 2008 are standard for contest dieting. Recently, people have realized how little volume you need to do for maintenance, something I've been saying for 20 years. Every 5 years, people come right back to the same volume and recommendations I've made all along. It's all me, and it always has been. In contrast, you've contributed edgelord memes and shit so stupid it hurts, where your best skill seems to be in applying filters to your YouTube video thumbnails. But seriously, a century of bodybuilders use full range of motion to get bigger than you ever will be, and you unironically make this video? Dude, please. And did you really just say you wouldn't ask the tallest person in the gym how to get tall, so why ask the biggest guy how to get big? Do you really not understand the difference in a genetically determined trait of height and a modifiable trait like muscle mass? Never mind. Rhetorical question. In any case, enough of paying attention to the insecure infants of the fitness industry. I'm going to demonstrate why my content is what it is, i.e. better than yours, by getting back to the discussion of specificity. So let me start by quickly redefining terms. Specificity simply says that the training that is done should be specific to the goal being sought. And I'll give examples later. SAID, which once again stands for Specific Adaptations to Impose Demands, says that the adaptation that occurs will be specific to the imposed demands, to the training that is being done. Which I guess can all be more simply stated as the training that you do should be chosen based on what you want to get better at, and what you get better at will be based on the training that you do. Specificity, SAID. So when we talk about this, we can speak of both specificity and SAID in sort of 3 different levels, from the macro to the micro. So at the most macroscopic level, the biggest level, we're simply talking about the activity that's either being done or that you're trying to improve, right? So if you want to become a better distance cyclist, that is the specific adaptation you're seeking, you do distance cycling. If you do distance cycling, you become a better cyclist. If you do distance running, you'll become a better distance runner. If you want to become a better sprinter, you do sprint training. If you want to get more flexible, you do stretching or yoga or whatever other hippie crap. If you want to get bigger muscles, you do hypertrophy training, right? And certain types of weight training will stimulate muscle growth and make you bigger. So that's at the macro level. But if we move a level down, we can talk about the sort of overall physiological descriptors of what's happening, right? So when we talk about becoming a better distance cyclist, we're talking about things like aerobic endurance, aerobic power, represented by VO2 max, Same thing for running, it's simply specific to running. If we're talking about hypertrophy, we may be talking about increased muscle size, which can obviously represent several different things. But we're talking, again, at the physiological level that describes that macro adaptation that you're seeking, right? But then we can go to a third level, the micro level, which is all of the specific individual adaptations that are describing the middle level, which are what represents the global level. So for example, VO2 max and aerobic endurance, which I'm just going to group together, is determined by a number of factors. One is the heart, stroke volume, and heart rate, which determines how much blood can be pumped per beat. How much oxygen can be carried in the blood is determined by hematocrit. Blood volume can increase, which is why endurance training helps bodybuilders stay vascular and get veiny and look like penises when they're real lean. Capillaries perfuse muscle and bring nutrients in and take waste products out. At the skeletal muscle level, we have mitochondria, and there's both mitochondrial density, how many mitochondria there are, and mitochondrial activity. You have enzymes such as citrate synthase. All of these adaptations, all of these systems may be adapting as a response to the endurance training and causing the middle level adaptation, which is improving the global adaptation, right? We're looking at, say, maximum strength. We've got issues of nervous system function, and that encompasses a whole bunch of different stuff. Fiber type, fiber size, cross-sectional area. There are all these lower level adaptations that go into increasing maximum strength, which is the mid-level adaptation to getting a bigger squat or bench or deadlift. If we're looking at hypertrophy, well, we know that there's two types of hypertrophy: myofibrillar, actual muscle fiber growth, sarcoplasmic, so we can differentiate those. We can get even deeper in terms of there could be an increase in muscle fiber size, cross-sectional area. As I discussed in that other video, there may be an increase in fiber number down the road. We can get into issues of changes in pennation angle, which is the angle at which the fibers actually run, fascicle length. There are adaptations in connective tissue, things like titin, which, by the way, Milo, I was talking about 20 years ago and said was going to be a big thing, you know, back when you were still in diapers, although you're still probably in diapers now. As far as sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, fluid, glycogen, we know that mitochondrial function is part of hypertrophy, or maybe a limiting factor. We've got ribosomes, both ribosomal number and ribosomal activity, which determines how well you can synthesize proteins when you turn on gene expression from certain kinds of training, which I discussed in another video, may represent part of what limits us to growth, why we can't keep growing. You may top that out. So there's all these micro-level adaptations that determine the mid-level adaptations that are really what's determining what we're looking at the macro level. And here's a quick partial summary of this, mainly because I need a thumbnail for my video, even if it's not as cool as Milo's carefully edited pictures. You've got your macro-level adaptations: improved cycling, running performance, muscle size, 1RM squat, clean, and jerk. Mid-level adaptations: increased VO2 max, anaerobic power, myofibrillar sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, central nervous and peripheral nervous system output. And then those micro-level adaptations: stroke rate, hematocrit, blood volume, capillary density, mitochondrial density, activity and number, enzyme activity for endurance, fiber size number, ribosomal number, activity, mitochondria. Again, this isn't meant to be comprehensive. It's just, again, I needed an image for the thumbnail. For the most part in this video, or two videos this one may turn out to be, I'm going to focus on the macro level and kind of the medium level, because getting into that deep molecular stuff is interesting and valid. And I dare say that most of the research coming out now in this field is really just determining why the things that we know work, right? It's giving the molecular basis of the training, types of training that we know. And I think if you look at a lot of it, it's just finding the explanation for what the coaches found through trial and error. So for example, we know that different kinds of aerobic training, like long duration aerobic training, tends to increase, I want to say, mitochondrial activity, I know enzyme activity, I'm swearing to that. Whereas VO2 max training, repeats of 3 to 5 minutes at all out, increase mitochondrial density, and I might have those reversed, and it doesn't matter. This has led to the idea of polarized training, where endurance trainers, athletes do a shit ton of low-intensity endurance, and then top it off with small amounts of top-end stuff, because those are synergistic adaptations. A similar example in the video I did that talked about strength cycles for bodybuilders, and there was also one about why powerlifters tend to grow better than bodybuilders. And I talked about how maximal strength is basically a function of muscle cross-sectional area, muscle size, and nervous system function. So what do you see in the modern era, and what I've always done with powerlifters is they do top-end work, meaning maximal strength work in that 85 to 100% range for the competition lifts to develop technique and all the different neural factors. And then you do donkey work, as I call it, the hypertrophy shit to get bigger muscle size. It's essentially polarized training for the strength sports. In premise, if we could identify each one of those individual adaptations, we might be able to identify a very specific type of training that caused it to occur. So, if you want to increase cardiac function, you do a certain thing. And actually, that was the original basis of interval training, was they thought its main effect was cardiac. We now know there's also peripheral effects in the muscle. Could there be a specific type of training to increase capillary density or hematocrit? We know that altitude training, by putting the body in a hypoxic state, increases erythropoietin, which will increase hematocrit. So do hyperbaric tense. So in premise, there could be specific types of training. Same thing for hypertrophy. And again, I'll talk about this in more detail later in the video, or in part 2 if it turns into one. There could be specific myofibrillar training. And similarly, you could have a sarcoplasmic hypertrophy type of training style. And actually, those cases, we do sort of know what those are. But again, different part of the video. People have tried to argue that there's specific hyperplasia training, but I think that just means steroids. Because like I said in that video, hyperplasia probably does occur, but I think it's just a consequence of long-term growth. If you can trigger it specifically, I'm not aware of it, and I don't think hyperplasia-specific training exists. I've been waiting for people to make a ribosome proliferation resistance training program. I'm surprised nobody's written a fucking ebook about that. But in premise, we could do that. We could be much more specific in our training. But at the micro level, we can't really do that. We can at that mid-level. Right? If you want to improve aerobic endurance, you do aerobic endurance training. If you want to improve speed, you do a speed training. If you want to improve maximal strength, you do maximal strength training. We can say that in terms of the specific training for those mid-level adaptations. At the current point, for the most part, we can't really do that at those micro-level adaptations. Not yet. As well, if we had the ability to identify the limiting factor in someone's progress, and we can at that middle level, right? If you're an aerobic cyclist and you've got shitty top speed, you do speed work. If you've got great speed and terrible endurance, you do endurance work. Like, we can do that at that medium level. It's the micro level that I'm talking about here. If we knew that an endurance athlete was lacking specifically capillary density, and we knew how to specifically train that, you could have them focus on that to fix that weak point. It would be the molecular, low-level physiological equivalent of doing weak point training in the weight room. If we knew that ribosomes were limiting, again, for muscle growth, we know that hyperresponders have a greater ribosomal response to training. If we knew how to increase that specifically, we could fix that, but we don't. We don't have the ability just yet. We will in the future, 10, 20 years, by that point, little Milo Wolf might have learned more than 2 words in his vocabulary. I'd say he might have grown up, but for insecure narcissists like him, that ain't never going to happen. So since we can't really do that, I'm going to focus on the first 2 levels, really the global level, and then maybe the middle level of what some of the underlying adaptations are. But that molecular level stuff, the very lowest level, we just don't have the data. I'm too lazy to trudge through the research to get into it. And I don't think that would fall into the heading of basic principles. So that's a little bit more on that. So again, specificity, whatever you want to get better at, determines the kind of training that you should do, and the type of training you do will determine the adaptation that you get. Moving on. And maybe another useful way of thinking about this, especially in terms of those mid, and it's certainly the micro level that I'm not going to get into too much, is that the system that's going to adapt or improve with training is the one that training stresses in a physiological sense. So by that I mean, when I say doing aerobic endurance training, that is stressing the aerobic system, it is stressing the heart, the blood carrying capacity, the muscle, the mitochondria, whatever system it's stressing, that is what will adapt as a specific response to imposed demands. If you're stressing the myofibrils, the actual contractile tissues of the muscle versus the energetic pathways, that will determine what adaptation is seen. So, what you want to get better at determines what you should do. What you do determines what you should get better at. But what you do determines which system is being physiologically stressed. And that's what will improve, which is what will improve what you want to improve, which is what you'll improve. Because you wanted to improve it. Okay, moving. So what are some actual examples of specificity? Well, it's more like what aren't examples of specificity. At a very global level, we have exercise type. If you want to get better at riding a bike, you ride a bike. And when you ride a bike, you get better at riding a bike. If you want to get better at running, you run. And if you run, you get better at running. If you want to get stronger, you lift weights or some type of resistance, right? It doesn't have to be weights. It has to be something that allows you to apply overload to the muscle in a certain way, right? So exercise type is a very general type. You want to get more flexible, you do flexibility training, whether it's yoga. Pilates has a flexibility component, and I'll address some of these. Don't get too hung up on this, because people who know more will be like, but there are exceptions. And yes, probably video too. So that's at a very global level. But you can get as deep into this as you want. So there are bioenergetic specificity, right? So there are 4 primary energy systems. The ATP-CP system, which is for very short maximal activities like sprinting. Anaerobic glycolysis, middle duration, somewhere between 30 to 60 up to maybe 90 seconds. Technically, once you get up to about 2 minutes, the aerobic system starts to predominate, but most people will define the aerobic system as 20 minutes up to hours. And some will go further and delineate an aerobic glycolytic system, which predominantly blood sugar, and an aerobic lipolytic system when you get to extremely extended activities. And those pathways tend to get trained by specific forms of training. So if you do sprint training, you develop the ATP-CP system, but not the aerobic system. If you train the aerobic system, you develop that, but not the ATP-CP system. If you're looking at the weight room, you can get into all kinds of specificity. For example, the type of muscular contraction. There's 3 types: concentric, lifting the weight; eccentric, lowering the weight; and isometric, where you're holding the weight in a static position. And although there is carryover, again, video 2, the one you tend to do will generally improve that, and less so the others. So if you do pure eccentric training, which becomes a fad every 4 or 5 years, it predominantly improves your eccentric strength without really improving your concentric strength. If you do concentric only lifting, where you only do the lifting bit, it improves concentric ability but not eccentric ability. And if you do isometrics, it increases your isometric strength without really improving concentric or eccentric. With isometric, it gets even further, because we can get into joint angles, where isometric training tends to increase strength at the joint angle that's used, plus or minus about 10 degrees. So if you do a bicep curl at the halfway point, you'll tend to get stronger at that 90-degree angle, plus or minus about 10 degrees. You won't get much stronger at the top, and you won't get much stronger at the bottom. However, if you do isometrics in the lengthened position, hi Milo, that tends to show more carryover at all lengths than if you do it in the shortened position, because of what it's doing. You can get even further. There is, to a degree, movement speed specificity, although I'll talk about this when I get into weight training more specifically. And there's something called the force-velocity curve, which is a relationship between speed of movement and the amount of force that can be put out. And in general, the faster you go, the less force that can be produced, and the slower you go, the more force can be produced. And isometrics are higher than concentric, and eccentrics are actually the slowest, sort of, and the most force. And the type of training where it falls on that force-velocity curve will determine the adaptations that are seen, where the movement speed you're using tends to improve things at that movement speed, but not at slower speeds. So, to a degree, slow maximal lifting, right, powerlifting, a squat that may take 2 or 3 seconds or more, won't necessarily improve your fast movement ability. Whereas something like sprinting, which is very fast, or jumping, which is plyometric, may improve your explosive ability, but it won't necessarily improve your maximum strength. And speaking to specificity, coaches have long put different types of training from maximal strength, heavy clean and jerk, which is strength speed, to snatches, which is speed strength, to jumping to sprinting on that curve, with the specific training done tending to improve the portion of the curve that you're on. Movement speed specificity. Trust me, it gets even deeper than that. I remember one weird study years ago that they had one group do bench press laying down and the other group bench press in some kind of standing or upright machine, and they found that the upright improved the upright bench and the laying improved the laying bench. So like there's a postural aspect, there's a movement speed aspect, there's all these factors of specificity. And like I said, all of this is ultimately kind of determined by those very low level molecular changes that I'm going to pretty much avoid. The point of this all being that specificity holds across a stunning range of activities, which is why you see athletes and trainees doing what they do. Cyclists ride the bike. They don't run, by and large. Runners run, they don't ride a bike. Unless they're injured and they have no choice. Swimmers swim. There's not a lot of carryover between those, if there's any. You want to get stronger, you don't do yoga because it's not a sufficient load against the muscles to increase strength. Again, as I'll discuss, hypertrophy training versus maximum strength training versus explosive training has differential adaptations that are specific to that type of training. So these are all general examples of specificity, which again sort of leads to the conclusion that if you want to get better at X, you should do X. And if you do X, you'll get better at X. You probably won't get better at Y, or you won't get much better at Y. If you do Y, you'll get better at Y, but not better at X, or not much better at X. And I'm qualifying that because it gets more complicated than that. But you're going to have to wait till part 2 to see how much more complicated. Even though I'm not going to talk about it in this video series, you can consider psychological training under the heading of specificity, where specific types of psychological training can improve that component of performance. Brings me to the fact that the elite female powerlifter I train, Sumi Singh, has a new book on mental training out, titled Becoming a Mentally Tough Motherfucker: How Elite Powerlifting Made Me a Better Person, Parent, and Partner, with both a foreword and epilogue by yours truly, which is a guide to all of the mental training skills she developed over the 8 years of her incredible elite powerlifting career. Topics include goal setting, dealing with resistance, setbacks, failures, journaling, anxiety on the big day if you do compete or have some sort of big demonstration or event, along with how to handle what happens if you choke during the event, both during and after. The book has finally been published and is available on Amazon for Kindle purchase right now. If you are in a different country, you will have to go to your specific Amazon and search on her name, which is Sumi Singh, S-U-M-I-S-I-N-G-H. You will not be able to get it from Amazon.com unless you're in the United States for Amazon reasons. You do not have to have a Kindle to get it. You need some sort of Kindle reader, and Amazon does have a cloud Kindle reader to read it on the website. So if you don't have the device, don't worry about it. If you prefer physical books, because you're an old fart like me, you can buy it in hard copy form as well on Amazon, and I'll put the links in the video notes. Buy it now, tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell everyone, and consider sending a copy to both Mike Israetel and little Milo Wolf. Because God help me, they both need help butching the fuck up and developing some mental toughness. Buy Sumi's book. You won't regret it. For the record, I neither read nor respond to comments on YouTube or Instagram, because I don't care. Mind you, I don't delete comments I don't like most of the weak-minded babies in this industry either. If you think my content is great and want to tell me how awesome I am, fantastic. If you think I'm a dumb asshole and want to call me names, also fantastic. I don't care either way, because I have better things to do. If you have questions that you want me to potentially read and or respond to, or most likely ignore, send them to questions@bodyrecomposition.com. Might get to them, might not. It's part of my charm. Oh yeah, I recently added a playlist to my channel, my buddy Solomon Nelson, who does some fantastic videos taking down the cretins in this industry. I've put the link directly to that playlist in the video comments, and you can also find them however you find playlists. He deserves the exposure. Go check him out.